then in fact you might want to not only use polling for simple stuff, but you could use it for everything. And that would mean that you didn't need half of the automatic restart stuff. Why did I get onto Node.js here? Well, I think it was probably because I was giving a similar talk to the Node.js group. But what I found with a lot of this stuff is that it's quite confusing to be implementing systems using different languages on different platforms, which you're building and maintaining all together at the same time. So I kind of went over towards Node.js. Who's used Node.js? Yeah, a third. I went over to that simply because I could build stuff on the installation level and stuff on the server, central server level in the same language, and I could have portability of functionality between the two. So, for example, something like a rules engine, I could have the same rules engine running in the cloud, pretty much the same one, albeit with different rules, as on the installation. So it was very nice from a portability point of view. But it's also great because it supports all the protocols. And it supports them in a really easy way out of the box. Because I liked MQTT, actually, I'm not using that one anymore. That's the correction I've got to make. But there's a great node module to support MQTT, and indeed, there are node modules for an awful lot of different protocols. So Node gives us a basis on which all this stuff can be done. And the serial port node module also gives us the ability to talk to peripheral devices very easily. So that talking to that little Arduino that sits on top of the Pi, it's very straightforward. And then just the ease of implementation. I think the big one at the end is probably, if we've got a fairly powerful environment for our rules engine and for all our protocol handling on the central controller that is in an installation and the central controller in the sky, then what it means is that down at the end peripheral level, if we're still using Arduinos or any other very low power technology, such as the people have seen those C code modules, but it's a low power device interface technology. You don't want to be writing any heavy lifting on there. You don't want to be having to manage lots of state, manage timing, things like that on these little devices. So having a powerful platform further up the line is very, very useful. And not to forget, there is of course the elephant in the room with all of this stuff. Because at the moment, the architectures of all the proprietary products that are out there are vertically integrated architectures. They have all the different pieces that all plug together nicely, as long as you buy it all from one vendor. And by the way, you can't fix any of it because it doesn't do what you want, because it's proprietary and they won't give you the code. So the solution, which is a long way off unfortunately, is to have not only in the center protocols which are standardized, or which at least can be made to be standard, but we also need APIs and we also need semantics, and that slide which I've nicked from somewhere doesn't have the word semantics, but we've got to have that too. And that's what I hope Adrian will explain in a few minutes' time when we go over to his talk. So that's the sad thing. It doesn't stop us from building systems today, but it's something which we have to keep our eye on and keep pushing towards. So locally, conventions. Sometimes spell checkers do interesting things. for a local configuration, so you're building something and you're determining the whole way that works within an envelope of, say, a house or something like that. Or, you can use really whatever semantics you like, and it probably doesn't matter as long as you understand what's going on within that box. But on a more global level, we need something which addresses the issue properly, and that's some kind of distributed approach to discovery, the equivalent of the domain name system, but for the Internet of Things. And it needs to be able to go right down to the endpoint level. So what's needed there is a whole ton of investment and collaboration and work, which is well beyond the scope of any of the projects we can fund at the moment, but yeah, we need to jump onto that. Anyway, so Adrian will no doubt talk about it. So it might be useful to talk about one of the projects we're doing at the moment. It's kind of, I wasn't able to talk about this until recently, but this is an interesting kind of eco home. It's completely new build, or it's attached to a terrace. I think basically the previous building there was so rubbish that they allowed it to be built in this way, despite the fact it's in an area which, as you can see, has sort of Victorian terrace style. And it's highly insulated, but the interesting features are things like it has shutters which are controlled automatically. It has a very interesting system of letting light into the building, and it has automatic forced air ventilation as control. So altogether, it probably has somewhere in the region of about 40 sensors that are controlling heating, ventilation, shutters, lights, all that stuff. What we're doing at the moment in building this, which is a prototype of the control system, is we are using the Pi and Arduinos, and we're linking together with a hardwired Ethernet, and we're using MQTT to allow all those things to talk to each other. Yeah, thanks to certain people in the room, we can do this without doing any hard work on protocols, because we can get all these components off the shelf for Node, for Arduinos, etc. At the moment, we're going to be using Zybe for logging. It doesn't, it's just a logging platform. We could just as easily have built one with Zybe says and use that. And the rules engine that we're using for this is local. The only remote rules that we have, and we do have a remote rules engine, the only stuff we're worried about there is more for alerting and different monitoring type conditions. And then we've got an admin app, which is on the web server, which is again on the Pi, which allows us to come in, through a secure connection and tweak, for example, tweaking the rules, or doing extra debugging and monitoring and what have you. So it's quite a nice little project, and it brings all this stuff to life. Okay, so only other thing I wanted to do was just give a quick plug for the workshop tomorrow. This is basically, I just thought, for those people who haven't played around with MQTT or haven't played around with pub/sub protocols, they might want to come along and do a bit of that. I don't know how popular this is going to be. If no one wants to do it, it won't manage at all. But it's one of the workshops that we'll be having. Bring along, if you can, not only a laptop, but also a sensor or an actuator, and we'll hook some of these things together and make them talk to each other and show how quickly that can be done. That's it. I'm going to start this. Right, we have got probably 10 minutes, so any questions?
I'm interested in where the rules engine approach might need to be augmented, because I'm thinking about the person living in that house, and they may be very committed sort of rulesy type person, but most people don't want to express their lighting preferences as a set of sort of when t is greater than 11 plus 4 minus unless the moon's higher. They want to just open the curtains and turn up the heating, and eventually the system just does it for them.
Okay, so very good point. For instance, I have in my own house a heating control system. It only has 2 buttons. It's got a rules engine, but that's not exposed to the house occupants. That is exposed to the architect of the system only. The 2 buttons say, I'm cold, and the other one says, I need a shower now, which overrides all the timing presets. And my opinion is that those are the kind of user interfaces we need to be looking for, not the whole complex thing. So what the rules engine is really the thinking that you don't have to do. Okay, it's Sunday morning. We typically sleep in, therefore we'll bring on the heating later, so we won't waste any energy warming up the house when we, in fact, it's actually probably a negative thing. It'll be like, oh, it's too warm. So I think the user interface is a completely separate thing, and I don't think I've showed it anywhere on that diagram, but the idea is it would be a very small number of buttons which do hardly anything, but just give you enough override. And part of the learning which you can do when you've got the data to analyse afterwards is you can say, well, actually, they're always overriding this thing. In fact, you can put a rule in that says, if they always override this thing at this time on Sunday morning, we better change the setting. And you can do that again at the rules engine level, but not involving directly the house owner to press those buttons. Jerry.
So I just want to put an appeal on behalf of Wimps, which is a commentary on the bandwidth thing. Hugely depends on your application. In circumstances where you have a lot of events happening, you've got a lot of remote devices, and you don't need particularly high response, then polling actually is better on bandwidth. And the second thing you need polling for is, as soon as you start to have the fire alarm on there, you want to be bloody sure you get the fire alarm first, rather than it's queued up behind 10 minutes of sorting out the air conditioning or worrying because it's got hot. Time trigger polling gives you that, because time triggering allows you to have absolute control of how much.
I'm talking about no latency pub sub, by the way. I wasn't talking about pub sub with a big latency.
So pub sub can have no latency, but if your central control is swamped trying to deal with what it's being told, you want your central thing to make sure it knows that, and as soon as you start doing, I've got to have priorities, and I've got to allow a request from the fire alarm so your software becomes a nightmare.
Well, actually, and by the way, something that's interesting to know on this project is because it's subject to building regs, of course, it's a normal domestic home. So, in fact, a lot of that fire alarm stuff is hardwired electrical logic.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
But I take your point. And then actually, they were sort of getting there with there was a case for polling somewhere along the line there. So I'm not as religious about it as I was when I started thinking about the talk.
Just to add to that, Paul alluded to someone in the audience. So I have worked for the last 5 years on MQTT, so if anyone's got any questions about it, do grab me. So I work for IBM. To perfectly take the point about when it's time critical, but there are many ways with PubSub you can overcome that. So it's not, but I would say that. So if anyone's interested in finding more about MQTT specifically, or come down my ear about it.
Yeah, are you going to, if we have run that workshop, are you going to come along and help with that? Or?
Yeah, I'll be voting.
Yeah, it would be good, because, I'm just a user, right?
One thing I'm interested in is a bit of a departure from the current things is the feedback control. Now, I'm assuming that you've built a system which is sort of custom, but using all of these bits that you've been talking about. And is your system available, and does it have feedback control? So like, for example, hitting that temperature and not overshooting that temperature, for example.
So the answer is yes, all the feedback controls are written into the rules, So yes, it does. Is this system published? No, because it's not the right time to publish it yet. But is it in our plans? Yes. It is in our plans to open source all of this stuff. But you know, there's a certain point at which you will open source things when the level of support requests is going to be manageable, which is not right now, but it's probably 6 months away. Once we've had real people living in there for a little while, then we'll open source it. Yeah. I think we've got probably time for one more question, yeah?
Having lived in an eco building myself, and it was a conversion of a big building turned into eco flats. An appeal on behalf of an end user.
Yeah.
Love the I want to shower now button, but geeks love that kind of control system. Expose the rules engine as well. Don't force them to not be able to write their own rules, because geeks love that, and if the system hasn't learned their habits, or they're going on holiday, or they're changing their job, or whatever, give them the opportunity to tweak it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, don't assume that no one in the house will be a geek.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd just like to lobby just one sort of step further on that.
Yeah.
You look at commercial off-the-shelf software whose experiences. One of the barriers some people have is that they really don't understand why the thing is doing what it's doing. They get very frustrated and turned off from it.
Yeah.
So actually allowing people to understand, all the automation and self-learning is great, but some people will come across something that they want to understand why it just doesn't do its done and how they can stop it doing that. Okay.
Yeah. Because of the system I have on my heating, I'm well aware of that one as well. Yeah.